I've spoken a lot recently about the police's problem with radio scanner eavesdropping back in the analogue days. Anyone could pick up a scanner and quite easily stumble upon their local police force's communications. As I've already said, many people were prosecuted for doing so, and some even went to prison. The very best outcome for most was the destruction of their precious and quite expensive radio scanner. Some operations, like Operation Marconi, involved spoof calls over the radio that spoke of UFO sightings to try and snare those who turned up. But what else did the police try to do in the analogue days to put an end to eavesdropping? Well, they eventually switched to a completely closed and encrypted system called airwave, the same system in use today. But back in the 1990s, not long after the mass migration to high-band VHF and UHF and the advent of commercially available radio scanners, various police forces in the UK tried other means of hiding their communications. The reason? Well, it only dawned on the Home Office during this time that people were listening. The thought never crossed their mind previously. Many stories were put in newspapers which highlighted the fact that criminals going armed to commit crimes were carrying radio scanners to monitor the police to gain the upper hand. MPs and the like often spoke out about the need to ban radio scanners altogether, and spoke of them being the perfect aid to criminals and not something that should fall into the hands of the wrong people. One of the first police forces to take action was Northumbria back in 1992. Special radios were announced and issued in a battle to keep one step ahead of their criminal audience. The Home Office allowed the force to use £11,500 in seized assets, what these were I don't know, to buy encrypted radios, which would prevent criminals, especially ram raiders, from monitoring police radio signals. These so-called high-tech radios, or rather the device used inside them, was developed in the early 1990s. It was a type of encryption that had already started to come into use on certain UK Home Office radio systems and was known as MASC. This is an acronym for Marconi Advanced Scrambler. The radios contained a MASC module, which is a small circuit board that could be fitted into the handheld radios. Numerous radios could support MASC encryption, such as some Philips PRP and PFX models, Motorola HT and MT series radios, and some Kenwood TK models. At the time, I think, and I'm sure someone will correct me, the radios in use were mainly the Philips PFX, Motorola HT600, and Kenwood TK340. It was developed by Marconi and could be fitted into existing handsets at a cost of around £200. MASC is effectively a type of band scrambling encryption that basically splits the user's voice into bands of frequencies and then rearranges the order of these bands many times per second. Things get more complex when an encryption key consisting of up to 12 numerical digits is thrown into the mix. The encryption key determines the order in which each portion of the transmission is pieced together. Even if you have a working MASC radio, it will not be able to hear another radio unless they're both using the same encryption key. The force was eager to begin using these new radios after 6 members of a Gateshead ram raid gang, jailed for a total of 33 years, after going on a £100,000 crime spree in the region, were known to have used a scanner to monitor police activities. The Home Office and the Association of Chief Police Officers highly regarded MASC and its security benefits, and it went on to be used by nearly all British police forces. The system wasn't rolled out to every radio, but rather special squads such as drug squads, counter-terrorism, and surveillance operations. 2 exceptions were the Northumbria Force, as I just described, and Nottinghamshire Force, which equipped every handheld UHF radio with MASC during the 1990s. In February 1993, Sussex Police had a similar problem and announced it was to spend £60,000 on a MASC encrypted radio system to defeat eavesdropping criminals. The equipment wasn't to be rolled out to the whole force, however, and would only be used to encrypt messages between the Sussex Force and the Regional Crime Squad or central government departments. Later that year, similar equipment was provided for communications with the surveillance and firearms teams. By May 1993, an experiment to prevent crooks from monitoring police radio messages was being tested by the West Midlands Police Force. Police at Birmingham International Airport began testing new MASC encrypted radios designed to stop eavesdroppers using radio scanners. The scheme was among a £1.8 million package of improvements to radio communications equipment, which would be considered by a police authority committee. When the force eventually switched to MASC encryption, and to what extent, isn't clear. In December 1993, Lothian and Borders Police were also testing a new MASC encrypted set, ready for a rollout in February 1994. It was estimated that the cost of equipping every radio in the Lothian and Borders force with one of the new chips was £250,000. By March 1994, every division in the West Midlands Force was being issued with 20 of the multi-channel encrypted sets to use on undercover operations. Officers tested 4 different makes and voted for one which could be split into 2, with the battery carried in a pouch and the microphone attached onto a shirt. The radios were flown in from Japan for a pilot study which soon proved their worth. Again, it's not clear to what extent MASC was eventually rolled out, and at this time it was only used for covert operations. Experiments were being carried out using MASC on West Mercia's police radio system in September 1994. Trials of the new scrambled radio system were being carried out in Worcestershire and Leominster. In March 1995, police in Hartlepool had gone off-air to beat the Eavesdroppers with the latest in digital technology. The pioneering move would make controversial radio scanners widely used by criminals a thing of the past. Patrol cars throughout Cleveland were fitted with mobile data terminals in a £500,000 project. The force was the first in the country to use the equipment, which cut out the need for radio messages being sent over the air altogether. Now, at the touch of a button, police officers could call up messages on computer screens in their vehicles and send replies. Chief Inspector Jeff Lee of Hartlepool Police said anyone wanting to listen in can't because there's no verbal signal being passed. A story broke in November 1995 that spoke of a new national radio system which aimed to stop criminals scanning transmissions from police cars. It was being piloted by the Northumbria Force, and if Northumbria Police found it successful in confusing villains, the system would become available nationwide. The £2 million scheme involved encrypting the VHF system, which was used by mobile patrols and could cover hundreds of miles. The test was whether the coding system will work as well on the wide-ranging VHF signals as it already did on localized UHF transmissions, preventing unwanted listeners. I can only assume that this was some sort of mobile MASC system linked to repeaters. There were 40 vehicles in southeast Northumberland involved in the trials. Encrypting all of Northumbria's UHF radios, the handsets used by patrolling officers across areas of 3 to 4 miles, was almost complete, and Superintendent Dennis Mitford, head of communications for Northumbria Police, called it a tremendous operational success. At the end of November 1995, representatives from the Home Office and the Association of Chief Police Officers evaluated the progress of the 6-week trials. Costs of implementing the modification in Northumbria were about £200,000, with encryption of UHF radios costing £500,000 over 2 years. In January 1996, police in Greater Manchester said they were facing a farcical situation because criminal gangs were way ahead of them in radio technology. This led to them being at the forefront of discussions around the Tetra airwave system that was some years away yet. Again, the frustration was around criminals that were able to listen in with scanners and other equipment to secret police communications. The force had reacted by adopting aging radio equipment with MASC encryption to protect operational commands, but it was very much a stopgap measure. The force was warned it faced a multi-million-pound bill annually when it adopted secure digital trunked radio communications, said Mrs. Bonfield of the Association of Metropolitan Authorities, who was referring to the Tetra system. This technology would form the basis of large public and private radio communication systems across Europe in the coming decades. The discussion around the move to the Tetra system began in the late 1990s after the Home Office demanded immediate approval by Britain's 43 police forces for the replacement of now outdated communication systems. The Greater Manchester Force was spending around £530,000 a year on running costs for its communication system in 1996, which was already some years old. The Greater Manchester Force alone faced a £3.75 million bill for the replacement of 5,000 items of equipment, such as handheld radios, police car radios and other items. This new digital trunk system would allow all police messages to be encoded to beat eavesdroppers. A Greater Manchester Force spokesman said, "This is an immensely complex project, which we're studying. Tetra airwave wouldn't begin rollout until the early part of the next decade." Of course, the rollout did happen, and Shropshire was hailed as a leading example in improved policing following the introduction of the pioneering digital radio system in 2002. Officers across the county were the first to go live with a new airwave system in the Midlands and were already seeing the benefits. Advantages included improved coverage, although some may disagree. In fact, many police officers would disagree. Enhanced speech quality, and of course the whole point of this video, security from eavesdroppers. Officers were now able to contact each other directly instead of going through control rooms, and each radio had emergency buttons to enable officers to call for backup. Other features in the pipeline would give officers direct access to computer databases, enabling them to spend more time on the beat. Following the introduction of airwave, Telford police were able to arrest 3 people in the middle of a burglary at a commercial premises on a retail park. The intruders were equipped with a radio scanner but were unable to pick up the police messages because of the new system. At last, after well over a decade of battling eavesdroppers, the remaining forces adopted Tetra airwave, and the problem of unsecure communications for the emergency services became a thing of the past. It's important for me to remind you that up until this time, not all forces were using MASC encryption, and not all forces who were had it on every radio, so police communications for the most part were well and truly in the clear.